I need a wife tomorrow, the Korean Mafia boss said. I replied, then you'll have to come live at my place. The day he showed up at my farm, I was on my knees in the Georgia red clay, hands deep in the soil, thinking about nothing more than getting these late summer vegetables planted before the heat killed them. I had no idea that within 24 hours, my entire life would be pulled into a world of blood and power because of one sentence spoken by a dangerous stranger. My name is Raya Silas. I am 29 years old, and for the past 2 years, I have been running my grandmother's small farm alone just outside Atlanta. It's not a fancy place, just 40 acres of vegetables and fruit trees, some chickens, and land that has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandmother died in 2023, and overnight everything she built landed in my hands. I stayed because this farm is the last piece of her I have left. Selling it was never an option, even when my parents begged me to. Life here is simple but demanding. I wake up before sunrise, tend the animals, fix whatever the weather breaks, and work a second job at the local feed store just to keep the lights on. I am not rich, but I survive. Most days it's just me, the land, and the endless Georgia sky. That afternoon in late August felt no different. It was brutally hot, close to 95 degrees, humid air thick with the smell of earth and growing things. I was by the chicken coop, planting tomato seedlings, gospel music playing softly from my phone. Then I heard an engine, low, expensive, out of place. That alone made me look up. People don't just show up here unannounced. I wiped sweat from my forehead and watched as a black Mercedes G-Wagon rolled up my dirt driveway. Clean, polished, the kind of vehicle that costs more than everything I own combined. The door opened, and 3 men stepped out first, all in dark suits, scanning the property like they were expecting trouble. Then he emerged. He was tall, sharp-featured, Korean, maybe early 30s. Black suit that probably cost more than my yearly income, expensive watch catching the sunlight. His dark eyes were cold, calculating, and he moved with the kind of confidence that comes from never hearing the word no. But when he got closer, I saw something underneath that control, urgency, maybe even desperation. He walked toward me with careful, deliberate steps, his polished shoes sinking slightly into my soft red earth. What struck me most were his eyes. They were focused, intense, but there was something tired behind them, like he hadn't slept in days. Are you Raya Silas? He asked. His voice was smooth, accented slightly. I stood slowly, brushing dirt from my jeans, trowel still in my hand. That's me. Can I help you? He took a breath, glanced around the farm, then looked straight at me. My name is Lee Jun. I need a wife by tomorrow. I froze. For a second, I thought it had to be some kind of joke or scam, but his face was dead serious. No smile, no hesitation. His 3 men stood at a distance, watching, waiting. I'm sorry, I said slowly. You need what? Instead of backing down, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, thick with papers. He held it out to me. If I am not married by midnight tomorrow, I lose my position as head of the Baekho Syndicate. My grandfather's decree states I must have a wife to prove stability and loyalty to tradition. If not, leadership passes to my cousin, Kang Min-suk. I flipped through the pages without touching them with my dirty hands. Legal documents in Korean and English, news articles, photos of men in expensive suits. The Baekho group, I'd heard whispers about them. Korean Mafia operating out of Atlanta, with connections all over the South. I looked back at him, my heart racing but my face calm. Why me? You don't even know me. He hesitated for just a moment. Your farm borders neutral territory. I researched you. You're independent, not connected to any organizations, and you're not someone who can be bought or threatened easily. He paused. My ex-fiancée left when she discovered what my world really was. Minsuk would expand our operations into trafficking, destroy everything my grandfather built on principle. I need someone who won't run. I leaned against the fence post, trying to process it all. I had heard stories about the Korean syndicates in Atlanta. Protection rackets, territory wars, violence that made the news. This man was asking me to step into that world. So what are you asking? I said carefully. Legal marriage, he replied, his tone all business. On paper, we register tomorrow. You attend necessary functions. After I secure my position with the elders, we can quietly dissolve it. 1 year maximum. I shook my head. I don't get involved in criminal shit. His jaw tightened slightly. Then you'll lose this farm in 6 months when the bank forecloses. I checked. You're drowning in property taxes and your grandmother's medical debt. My breath caught. He'd done his homework. The bastard knew exactly where I was vulnerable. He pulled out a contract from the folder. I pay off your debts. You get to keep your farm. I get my position. After 1 year, quiet divorce, and you walk away with your freedom. I stared at him, at this dangerous man standing in my grandmother's garden, offering me a way out of the hole I'd been drowning in for 2 years. Every instinct told me to say no, to send him away, to handle my problems on my own like I always had. But I also knew he was right. 6 more months and the bank would take everything. If I agree, I said slowly, meeting his eyes without flinching. You live here. My rules. No guns in my house. No violence on my property. And you don't own me. This is business, and I'm a partner, not property. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe respect. He clearly hadn't expected me to set terms. Deal, he said after a moment. We shook hands right there by the chicken coop. My palm was rough with calluses and dirt. His was smooth, cool, and his grip was firm. I didn't know it then, but that handshake was the moment everything began. I didn't know that within 24 hours, I'd be married to one of the most dangerous men in Atlanta. I didn't know his world would try to kill me, and I didn't know that somewhere between his threats and my refusal to back down, somewhere between the fires and the blood and the lies, we'd stop pretending. I didn't know that a handshake would save us both. The next morning felt like moving through someone else's life. Lee June and I drove into Atlanta together just after sunrise. The sky still that pale pink color that makes everything look softer than it really is. The road was quiet except for the hum of his Mercedes, and neither of us talked much. Not because it was awkward exactly, but because we both understood how strange this was. 2 strangers heading to a courthouse to get married with no love story. No family gathered. No celebration waiting afterward. The Fulton County Courthouse was a gray concrete building downtown, all sharp angles and government flags. His guards stayed in 2 black SUVs parked across the street, watching. Inside, the hallways smelled like floor cleaner and old paper. The judge who met us in the small ceremony room was an older black man who took one look at Lee June and went still. Recognition flickered across his face, then careful neutrality. He knew exactly who was standing in his office. The ceremony itself was fast. No rings, no vows beyond what the law required. We signed our names on papers that felt too thin to hold this much weight. I noticed my hand shook slightly as I wrote my signature. His didn't. Not even a tremor. Just steady, controlled precision like he'd done this 1,000 times before. When the judge pronounced us married, Lee June's expression didn't change at all. On the drive back to the farm, he was quiet, but his eyes never stopped moving. He memorized every turn, every landmark, every side road we passed. I watched him catalog escape routes and defensive positions without even thinking about it. This man lived in a world where survival meant always calculating, always preparing for the next threat. I wondered what it cost him to never turn that off. He showed up at my place 2 hours later with a single black suitcase. Expensive leather, minimalist, the kind that probably cost more than my truck. Everything he owned fit in one bag. That told me more about his life than any of his carefully chosen words had. I showed him to the spare bedroom, my grandmother's old room. I kept it mostly the same since she passed. Just changed the sheets and cleared out her personal things. You get this, I said, standing in the doorway. Bathrooms down the hall. Don't touch my stuff. He nodded once, stepped inside, and his eyes immediately started scanning. Windows, door hinges, sightlines. Looking for exits. Old habits from a dangerous life. I noticed but didn't comment. The culture clash started almost immediately. He took business calls in Korean on my front porch, his voice low and commanding, speaking a language I couldn't understand to people I'd never meet about things I probably didn't want to know. Meanwhile, I worked the farm like I always had, feeding chickens, repairing the fence line, covered in Georgia red clay and sweat. Once, I caught him watching me from the kitchen window. Not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. Like he couldn't understand how someone could be content doing work this simple, this physical, this quiet. That first dinner was painful. I made fried chicken and collard greens, comfort food from my grandmother's recipes. He sat at my small kitchen table looking polite but completely out of place in his expensive clothes at my mismatched chairs. This is different, he said carefully, picking up a fork. I almost smiled. You don't eat Korean food much? I asked. Not often here, he admitted. We ate in near silence. 2 a.m, I couldn't sleep. Too much change, too fast. I got up for water and found him standing by the living room window, completely still, staring out at the dark fields. His gun sat on the side table within easy reach. You don't sleep? I asked quietly. He turned slightly, not startled despite me appearing behind him. Not much. I leaned against the doorframe. PTSD. He paused. Something like that. I could have pushed for more, but I didn't. Instead, I just said, coffee's in the kitchen if you need it, and went back to my room. I think that surprised him more than anything else that day. I wasn't afraid. Day 3 changed something between us. I was out by the fence line, fighting with a section that had come loose during the last storm. Sweat was running down my back and I was cursing under my breath when I heard footsteps behind me. Lee Jun stood there, hands in the pockets of what had to be a $5,000 suit. Let me, he said simply. I looked at him like he'd lost his mind. You're in a suit that costs more than my monthly bills. He shrugged and started removing his jacket. I've worn worse. He helped me fix that fence, and I'll be damned if he wasn't surprisingly good with his hands. I showed him the proper technique for tightening the wire, and he listened without any ego, just focused attention. Why do you do this? He asked after a while, wiping sweat from his forehead. The farm. All of it. I looked out at the land my grandmother had loved. It's mine, I said. No one can take it. Something shifted in his expression then. Understanding, maybe. He knew exactly what I meant. That evening, he tried to cook dinner. I heard him in the kitchen, heard the smoke alarm go off, and found him staring at a pot of burned rice like it had personally betrayed him. Couldn't help it. I laughed. Really laughed. For the first time since he'd walked into my life, he looked at me, startled, and then the corner of his mouth lifted just slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. Something softened between us in that moment. We were still strangers, still wary, still trying to figure out if this insane arrangement could possibly work. But for the first time, we saw each other as people instead of problems. If you're wondering whether two people from completely different worlds can build something real from a transaction, stick with me, because this story gets a lot more complicated before it gets better. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens when his enemies find out about me. And trust me, you'll want to see how a farm girl handles a mafia war. By week 2, we'd fallen into something that almost looked like routine. Awkward, but functional. He handled his business from the porch while I handled mine in the fields. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me through the window while I worked, and it wasn't creepy or controlling. More like he was studying something he didn't understand. How someone could find peace in dirt and sweat and physical labor. He'd never had that kind of freedom. Small things started changing. I'd come in from the fields and find containers of Korean food on the kitchen counter. Leftover bulgogi, kimchi, japchae noodles. No note, no explanation. Just there. His way of sharing something without having to say it out loud. I tried them all, even when the spice made my eyes water. Then everything shifted. I was alone, repairing the chicken coop, when I heard tires on gravel. A black sedan rolled up, expensive and out of place. 3 men stepped out, all in dark clothes, moving with that particular arrogance that comes from never facing consequences. I didn't recognize them, but I knew they weren't here for anything good. "You must be the boss man's new pet," the tallest one said, looking me up and down. His tone had an edge to it, racist and dismissive. "Interesting choice." The other 2 laughed. "Nice farm you got here," another one added, glancing around. "It would be a real shame if something happened to it." My heart was pounding, but I stood up slowly, keeping my face blank. "You're on my land without an invitation. I suggest you leave." They thought that was hilarious. One of them took a step closer, still grinning. I grabbed the pitchfork leaning against the coop and leveled it at chest height. "Try me." Something in my eyes must have convinced them I wasn't bluffing, because they backed off, still laughing like this was all a game. They got in their car and left, kicking up dust as they went. The second they were out of sight, my hands started shaking. I didn't let myself fall apart, though, just went back to work. When Lee Jun came home that evening, I told him about it, trying to sound casual. His whole face went cold. Not angry exactly, colder than that. "Dangerous." "Describe them," he said, his voice flat. I did, and I watched recognition click into place. "Min-suk," he said quietly. "He's testing me. Through you." I crossed my arms. "What are you going to do?" His jaw tightened. "Handle it." I met his eyes. "No killing on my property." He paused for a long moment, then nodded. "All right." Things got worse after that. Someone must have tipped off the media, because 2 days later there was an article online. "Crime boss's shocking marriage to local farmer." They had photos of us I didn't even know existed, taken from a distance. My phone started blowing up. The church ladies were whispering. My parents called, furious, demanding to know what I'd gotten myself into. Even some of Lee Jun's own people questioned his choice, though they used politer words to hide the same ugly prejudice. The morning my tractor wouldn't start, I knew it wasn't an accident. Lee Jun had one of his guys look at it, a mechanic who worked for the syndicate. He came back with his face grim. Brake lines cut clean through. Steering fluid drained. If I'd driven that thing, I would have crashed. Probably died. My hands curled into fists. This farm was my livelihood, my grandmother's legacy, and someone was trying to destroy it to get to him. "This ends now," Lee Jun said, and there was something lethal in his voice. "Don't start a war on my behalf," I told him. He looked at me. "It's already started." He met with Min-suk that afternoon at some neutral restaurant downtown. I wasn't there, but he told me about it later. Min-suk had mocked him. "Farm girl? Really? Grandfather would be ashamed." Lee Jun's response was ice. "Touch her again, and tradition won't protect you." Min-suk just smiled. "You've gone soft. Proves you're not fit to lead." The threat was clear. This was only going to get worse. Week 3, I woke up to the smell of smoke. Not wood smoke. Chemical, wrong. I ran outside in my sleep clothes and saw flames climbing up the side of my barn. Small, contained, but growing. Someone had set this deliberately. I grabbed the hose and started fighting it, screaming for help. Lee Jun appeared with 2 of his guards. and together we got it under control before the whole structure went up. That's when I heard the goats. Someone had locked them inside. I kicked the door open, choking on smoke, and dragged them out one by one. By the time we finished, I was covered in soot and ash. My hands burned, my lungs raw. The adrenaline was wearing off and I was shaking. Lee Jun grabbed my shoulders, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw real emotion break through that control. Fear, anger, something close to desperation. Pack a bag, he said. You're leaving until this is over. I pulled away from him. This is MY land. I don't run. His voice rose. You could have died. I got right in his face. So could you every day. I'm not fragile. He stared at me, and I watched him struggle with something internal. Frustration, yes, but also respect. And something else. Terror. Not for himself. For me. Maybe the first time in years he'd felt genuine fear for another person. I wasn't going anywhere. And I think that's when he realized this fake marriage had stopped being fake for both of us, whether we were ready to admit it or not. If you think this is intense now, wait until you see what happens when Min-suk stops playing games and goes for blood. The next chapter is where everything explodes, and trust me, you don't want to miss how Raya handles a mafia war coming for her doorstep. After the fire, Lee Jun insisted on security. Guards posted at the property line, cameras installed along the perimeter. I hated it, hated feeling like I needed protecting, but I wasn't stupid enough to refuse completely. Perimeter only, I told him. Not inside my house. He agreed without argument, and that surprised me. Compromise wasn't something he did often. 3 a.m, I found him outside on the porch steps, smoking. He never smoked. I stood in the doorway, watching him stare out at the dark fields. Nightmare? I asked quietly. He didn't turn around. Fire, he said. Just that one word. I didn't push. Instead, I sat down beside him and handed him the water bottle I'd brought. We sat there in silence for maybe 20 minutes, and I got the feeling this was the first time in a long time he hadn't been alone with whatever haunted him. The next morning, we started rebuilding the burned section of the barn. He showed up in old jeans and a t-shirt, and when the Georgia heat got brutal, he pulled his shirt off. That's when I saw them. Scars everywhere. Knife wounds across his ribs, bullet grazes on his shoulder, burn marks on his back. A map of violence written on his skin. How are you even alive? I asked. He wiped sweat from his face. Luck. Mostly spite. I laughed despite myself, and I swear I saw the corner of his mouth lift. Later, while we were taking a water break, I asked about his grandfather. I expected him to shut down, but he didn't. He told me stories about a man who was brutal when he had to be but lived by a code most people wouldn't understand. Honor meant something different in his world. He would have respected you, Lee Jun said, looking at me. You don't bend. I tilted my head. Is that why you chose me? He paused. Initially. Not anymore. The air between us shifted, heavy with things we weren't saying yet. My parents showed up 2 days later, and it went exactly as badly as I'd expected. My mother was crying. My father was furious. You married a gangster? For money? He shouted. I stood my ground. For MY Farm. My choice. They didn't understand. Didn't want to. Lee Jun was inside, and I knew he could hear everything, but he stayed hidden, respecting that this was my fight. After they left, I went to my room and cried for the first time since this whole thing started. When I finally came out, there was a cup of tea sitting outside my door, still warm. He never said a word about it. His people were pressuring him too. I overheard one of his calls. The elders don't approve. This looks weak. His response was ice. Then they can question me directly. He was protecting me even from his own world. That night I couldn't sit still. I went out to fix a loose section of fence, working off frustration and fear. He appeared beside me without a word and started helping. We worked in silence for a while before I asked what I'd been wondering for weeks. Why did you really choose me? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Because you looked at me like I was human. Not useful. Not dangerous. Just human. I turned to face him. You are dangerous. Guilt crossed his face. I know. I shook my head. But you're also fixing my fence at midnight. People aren't one thing. Something snapped in that moment. I kissed him. Not gentle, not planned. Weeks of tension and fear and something I didn't want to name yet. He froze for half a second, shocked, then kissed me back with a careful intensity that made my knees weak. When I pulled away, my heart was racing. This complicates things, he said, his voice rough. I smiled despite everything. Things were already complicated. The call came the next morning. Lee Jun's face went dark as he listened. Then he hung up and looked at me. The syndicate elders. They're demanding a marriage verification. If they rule it fake, I lose everything and you become a loose end they'll want eliminated. We have 48 hours. My stomach dropped. He grabbed my hands. If this goes wrong, I have people who can get you out. New identity, money, safety. I pulled my hands back. I'm not running. He said my name like a warning. Raya, I cut him off. We finish this. Together. He stared at me and I saw it then. The exact moment he realized what I'd known for days. This wasn't fake anymore. Not for either of us. And that made it more dangerous than any fire or sabotage could ever be. Want to see how a farm girl survives a mafia interrogation? Hit subscribe because this story is about to get brutal. Those 48 hours were a blur. Lee Jun taught me basic Korean phrases, the respectful greetings I'd need, the customs that mattered to the elders. I made it clear I wasn't changing who I was. They'll hate me anyway. I told him. Might as well hate me for who I actually am. He stopped mid-step. That's why you'll survive this. Min-suk tries to be what they want. You just are, but I'd learned to navigate his world on my terms. His tailor showed up with a traditional Korean dress. Beautiful but restrictive. I wore it. With my work boots. Lee Jun looked at me and shook his head, but I caught the hint of a smile. The night before the meeting, we sat on the porch like we'd done so many times. What if we lose? I asked. He was quiet. We won't. I turned to him. But if we do? His jaw tightened. Then I make sure you survive. I shook my head. That's not what I asked. He looked at me then, really looked at me. This stopped being about duty weeks ago. I took his hand, and his fingers tightened around mine. For me too. The private estate north of Atlanta was designed to intimidate. Marble floors that echoed every footstep. Guards at every door. It worked. 5 elders sat in a semicircle, older Korean men in expensive suits, their faces carved from stone. Min-suk stood off to the side, confident and smug. Every eye turned to me when I walked in wearing that dress and those boots. Some looked hostile. Some looked curious. Lee Jun walked beside me but let me stand on my own. The questions started in Korean. Lee Jun translated each one, giving me time to think, showing me respect even here. Why did you marry him? I met the eldest man's eyes. Because he asked. Because I chose to. Min-suk laughed, switching to English. Convenient timing. Debt-ridden farmer. Rich husband. Quite the rescue. I didn't flinch. I didn't know who he was when he showed up. I knew what he offered. I set my terms. He agreed. That's more than most marriages start with. An elder leaned forward. You expect us to believe this is real? I straightened. I don't expect you to believe anything. I know it's real. One of the elders leaned back. I surprised him. Good. The room went quiet. Lee Jun stood then and spoke in Korean. I didn't understand every word, but I felt the weight of them. He was laying himself bare in front of these men, admitting that what started as an arrangement had become something true. The few words I caught were enough. She chose me knowing what I am. No one has ever done that. He paused. If that makes me weak in your eyes, so be it. But I will not dishonor her or this marriage. The elders exchanged looks, surprised by his bluntness. Minsuk moved fast, presenting photos, separate bedrooms, moments that looked cold and transactional. She's a pawn. He's desperate. But Lee Jun's tech specialist, a sharp young Korean woman, was faster. She pulled up security footage on the large screen. Minsuk's men sabotaging my farm, setting the fire. Then came financial records showing embezzlement. An audio recording of Minsuk planning a coup, ordering a hit on Lee Jun. He's betrayed us all. The elders' faces went hard. The verdict came swift and brutal. Minsuk was stripped of position, to be dealt with outside these walls. The marriage was declared legitimate. The eldest spoke in Korean, and Lee Jun translated for me. You've chosen a hard path. Protect what you found. I nodded once. We were halfway to the car when the gunfire started. Minsuk's last desperate play. Everything happened fast. Glass exploded. Lee Jun's hand hit my chest, shoving me down. The crack of gunfire, 3 shots, 4. His body jerked. Warm blood splashed on my face. I grabbed his gun from his belt without thinking and fired. The kick nearly knocked me over, but I hit Minsuk in the leg. Lee Jun's guards swarmed, finishing what I'd started. Minsuk went down screaming. In the car, both of us bleeding, Lee Jun looked at me with something like shock. You shot him. My hands were shaking. He was going to kill you. He pressed his good hand over his shoulder wound. You saved me. I met his eyes. We're even. For the first time since we'd met, there was nothing transactional between us. Just 2 people who'd chosen each other and were willing to bleed for it. Think this is where the story ends. Not even close. The next phase is where they build something real from all this chaos. And trust me, you need to see how a mafia boss and a farmer make this work. The days after were quiet in a way that felt strange. Both of us were wounded, both healing. I cleaned Lee Jun's bullet wound twice a day, my hands steady even when his weren't. He watched me carefully, like he was waiting for me to break down over what I'd done. Finally, I said it out loud. I'm not sorry I shot him. He touched my wrist gently. I know. I'm sorry you had to. That night, he told me about his first kill. He was 16. It wasn't the story I expected, and it hurt to hear, but I didn't judge, I just listened. He told me about the nightmares, about waking up thinking his hands were still covered in blood, about the 17-year-old kid he'd killed on his grandfather's orders who turned out to be unarmed. I held him while he broke apart. Maybe that's what choosing each other really meant. Sometimes that's all someone needs. Within the week, Lee Jun made a decision that shocked everyone. He stepped back from active operations, delegated the violent day-to-day work to trusted people. He stayed involved strategically, but he chose something different. The elders disapproved but accepted it. He'd earned that right. I can't leave entirely, he told me, but I can choose what I become. The farm became something neither of us expected. The first time one of his lieutenants called me Hyung Sunim, sister-in-law, Lee Jun corrected him. Bin, wife and not sister. The room went silent. That was the moment his world knew this was real. Some of his people helped rebuild the barn, and I watched Korean tradition meet Georgia practicality. Lee Jun tried to learn farming and was terrible at it, but he kept trying. I learned to make kimchi, and while it wasn't perfect, he ate it without complaining. We argued constantly, usually about his need to protect me versus my need to breathe, but we learned to meet in the middle. My parents came back eventually, wary but willing to try. They saw I was still myself, maybe stronger but unchanged where it mattered. Lee Jun didn't try to charm them or win them over. He just existed, respectful and quiet. My father finally asked him, "You make her happy?" Lee Jun met his eyes. "I try." Dad nodded slowly. "Then I guess that's something." The farm became a fusion of both our worlds. Korean phrases mixed with Southern sayings. His expensive suits hung next to my work boots. Kimchi sat beside collard greens in the fridge. Traditional met practical, and somehow it worked. The year passed in seasons. Spring brought new planting and old syndicate members who decided to trust me. Summer brought my father back, quieter this time. Fall brought the decision to stop pretending this was temporary. Winter brought the ceremony. Small gathering on the farm under string lights. Her people, his trusted people, even a few elders who'd come to accept us. I wore a simple white dress with my grandmother's jewelry and kept my boots on. Lee Jun wore a traditional black and gold hanbok, honoring his grandfather. Our vows were in both English and Korean. I spoke first. "I chose you in danger. I choose you in peace. I choose you knowing what you've done and who you're trying to become." His voice was steady. "You saw me when I was a weapon and called me human. You gave me a reason to be more. I choose you. Always." When he kissed me, it was tender and real and earned. Even the elder officiating smiled, which Lee Jun said later was basically a miracle. 6 months after that, we sat on the porch at sunset, the sky painted gold and purple. His arm was around me, my head on his shoulder. His other hand rested on my stomach, still flat, barely 3 months, and we hadn't said it out loud yet, but we both knew. A daughter, if the ultrasound was right. She'd be born into both worlds, and somehow that felt right. "You came demanding a wife," I said quietly. He smiled. "You changed the terms." I turned to look at him. "You stayed because I chose you back." His expression softened. "I didn't think I could be chosen. Didn't think I deserved it." I touched his face. "You're still learning what you deserve." He kissed my forehead. "So are you." The farm stretched out around us, peaceful. His guards were there, discreet in the distance. My chickens wandered free. 2 worlds that shouldn't have fit, but we'd chosen each other anyway. Not because we had to, because we wanted to. This is where most stories end, but life doesn't work that way. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. And if this one meant something to you, share it. Sometimes people need to know that choosing each other is enough.